My name is Sophia Williams, and at 28 years old, I was 3 days away from marrying the love of my life, Ethan Blackwood. Everything was perfect, a fairy tale I had built with my own two hands. But then, his obscenely wealthy parents ambushed me with a prenuptial agreement and an ultimatum. Sign away my future, or the wedding is off. What they never expected was that behind my modest, middle-class facade lay a $9 million net worth, a successful tech company, and a spine of steel. Their smug, condescending world was about to collide with the one thing they truly respected: overwhelming financial power. Before we dive into how I wipe those smirks off their faces, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories where the underdog flips the entire game board, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. My story doesn't start with money. It starts in a quiet Chicago suburb, in a home filled with books and the smell of chalk dust. My parents were high school teachers who instilled in me two core beliefs: work hard and be kind. We were comfortable, but every luxury was a carefully planned event. My tuition to Northwestern University was covered entirely by scholarships I earned through caffeine-fueled all-nighters and a relentless drive to succeed on my own terms. The turning point came during my senior year. My grandfather, my biggest cheerleader, passed away. He had lived a simple life as an accountant, but he had invested with quiet genius for 50 years. When his will was read, I was stunned to learn he had left me a life-altering inheritance. I used a fraction of it to launch my startup, EduTech Solutions, a company dedicated to creating accessible educational software. I poured the rest into a diversified portfolio, just as he had taught me. By the time I met Ethan, my company was valued at over $1 million, and my total net worth was hovering around $9 million. But no one knew. I lived in a pleasant but unassuming apartment, drove a reliable 5-year-old Audi, and dressed in clothes that were elegant but never ostentatious. My wealth was my secret, a tool for freedom, not a badge for status. I wanted to be loved for my mind and my heart, not my bank statement. I met Ethan at a charity gala my company was sponsoring. He was different from the other trust fund heirs in the room. He wasn't looking over my shoulder for someone more important. He was looking at me. He was fascinated by my work in educational equity, and our conversation flowed from software architecture to our shared love for spicy Thai food. He was a lawyer at his family's prestigious firm, Blackwood and Associates, but he spoke of using the law to seek justice, not just to enrich the wealthy. Our love story was a whirlwind of weekend hikes, late-night debates, and a profound sense of coming home. He admired my independence and passion. I adored his integrity and warmth. When he took me to meet his parents, Richard and Victoria Blackwood, I stepped into another world. Their Lake Forest estate wasn't a home. It was a monument to generational wealth, with sprawling gardens and a stone facade that looked down on the world. Victoria, in particular, was a master of the backhanded compliment. Northwestern is a fine school, she'd remarked over our first dinner. Their scholarship programs for the less fortunate are truly commendable. Over the next 2 years, the subtle digs continued. She'd call my company my cute little hobby, and once asked if my parents were enjoying their retirement, despite my telling her multiple times they were still teaching. Each comment was a perfectly polished little stone, designed to remind me of my place. Ethan, bless his heart, often seemed oblivious, accustomed to his mother's coded language. I let it slide, believing that our life together would be separate from them. But 3 days before the wedding, with the final arrangements confirmed and my dress waiting, the phone rang. It was Victoria. "Sophia, dear," she said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "Ethan will be tied up all day, and I thought it would be lovely for us to have some one-on-one time before the festivities begin. Come for tea this afternoon?" I was exhausted from the wedding prep and naively thought this might be an olive branch. I agreed, completely unaware that I wasn't walking into a tea party. I was walking into an ambush. The Blackwood estate was even more imposing up close. As my Audi crunched softly up the long, winding driveway, the mansion seemed to loom, a fortress of old money and unassailable arrogance. I noticed Richard's gleaming black Mercedes parked beside Victoria's Range Rover, the first red flag. Victoria had specifically said this would be one-on-one time. The housekeeper, a woman with perpetually sad eyes, led me not to the bright, airy sunroom where Victoria usually entertained, but to the formal sitting room. The air inside was still and cold, carrying the faint, cloying scent of lemon polish and old money. It was a museum of a room, filled with dark wood, heavy drapes that swallowed the afternoon light, and portraits of stern-faced Blackwood ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to judge my very presence. It reminded me of a dinner party months ago, when Victoria, upon learning I'd closed a major funding round, had smiled sweetly and said, "How wonderful for you, dear. It must be so satisfying to earn your own little pocket money." And there they were, seated on high-backed chairs like monarchs holding court. Richard and Victoria. They weren't dressed for tea. They were dressed for a corporate execution. "Sophia, dear, thank you for coming," Victoria said, her smile as thin and brittle as a shard of ice. "Please, have a seat." I sat opposite them on a delicate antique sofa that felt far too fragile for the weight of the moment. The silver tea service between us remained untouched, a prop in their little play. Richard dispensed with pleasantries immediately. We thought it prudent to discuss a few final matters before the wedding. He began, his voice the epitome of boardroom authority. "Matters of a practical nature, to ensure a smooth and stable future for you and Ethan. Every successful marriage is built on a foundation of clear agreements," Victoria added, folding her hands primly. My stomach coiled into a tight knot. "What kind of agreements?" I asked, my voice steady despite the sudden chill in my veins. Richard reached for a thick, leather-bound portfolio next to his chair. He extracted a document, bound in a severe navy blue cover, and slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped inches from my hands. "This is a standard prenuptial agreement our family lawyer has prepared," he announced. "It simply protects foundational family assets and clarifies the distribution of property in the highly unlikely event of a dissolution." I stared at the document, the words "prenuptial agreement" echoing in the silent room. "Ethan and I have never discussed this," I said, my gaze lifting to meet theirs. "This is the first I'm hearing of it." "Oh, Ethan understands the necessity," Victoria interjected with a breezy wave of her hand. "The Blackwood family is not just a family. It's an institution with assets that have been protected for generations. This is a formality, dear. All spouses marrying into the family complete one." I knew that was a lie. His brother had married an heiress, and his sister, a senator's son. They were marrying into power, not threatening it. I was the anomaly. I was the perceived threat. My fingers finally closed around the document. As the founder of a tech company, I had read enough contracts to immediately recognize the predatory nature of this one. It wasn't a shield. It was a weapon pointed directly at me. It stipulated that in the event of a divorce, I would walk away with nothing but what I entered the marriage with. Any assets acquired during the marriage, any increase in shared wealth, even gifts exchanged between us, would remain Ethan's sole property. But the most insidious part was Section 4, a vaguely worded clause about intellectual property developed during the marital period that could potentially give them a claim on my company's future innovations. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic trap bird. "This seems incredibly one-sided," I said, struggling to keep the tremor out of my voice. Richard chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "It's standard language when there is a significant disparity in assets. You must understand, Sophia, we are talking about a legacy." "And what about my assets?" I asked, a flicker of defiance breaking through my shock. "My business? My own intellectual property?" Victoria let out a small, tinkling laugh that grated on my every nerve. "Your software venture is certainly a charming accomplishment, dear. But we are discussing generational wealth. The scale is hardly comparable." The condescension was a physical blow. In their world, I was a charity case, a teacher's daughter who had hit the jackpot. The idea that I might have anything worth protecting was, to them, utterly absurd. "When does this need to be signed?" I asked, my voice now cold and controlled. "Today would be ideal," Victoria said, producing a gold Montblanc pen as if from thin air. "The wedding is in 3 days. It's best to have these administrative details settled." I placed the document back on the table. "I will need my own lawyer to review this first." Richard's perfectly groomed eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. "Is that really necessary? Our family attorney is one of the best in Chicago." Best for the Blackwood family's interests, I'm sure, I counted. But as you've pointed out, our interests in this matter are not aligned. Victoria's smile vanished. Sophia, this is truly quite simple. It's just practical. Then you won't mind giving me time to have it reviewed. Richard and Victoria exchanged a look, a silent, powerful communication that excluded me completely. I'm afraid we must insist, Richard said, his tone turning to granite. These things become messy if left to fester. We require your signature today. The air crackled with their ultimatum. Are you saying, I asked, forcing myself to speak each word with chilling clarity, that the wedding is dependent on me signing this document, right now, without legal counsel? Victoria's cold smile returned. What we are saying, dear, is that if you truly love Ethan, you will understand the need to protect his family. You will see this as the simple business arrangement it is. Richard cut through her veiled threat with a bluntness that was almost a relief. Sign it, or the wedding is off, he stated. That is the bottom line. We have invested a great deal in this celebration, but we will not hesitate to cancel it to protect our family's future. The threat hung in the air, suffocating me. They were so certain of their power, so sure of my desperation. I was the poor girl who had snagged a prince. Of course I would sign. What other choice did I have? Slowly, I stood up and gathered the document. I need to discuss this with Ethan. Ethan is aware of our position, Victoria said dismissively. He may have been too delicate to broach the subject himself, but he understands his obligations. That was the line that finally broke me. The thought that Ethan, my Ethan, knew about this, that he had let his parents corner me like this, sent a spear of ice through my heart. I walked out of that room without another word, the prenup feeling like a slab of lead in my hands. As I reached the front door, I heard Victoria's voice, sharp and clear, drift from the sitting room. She'll sign. She'd be a fool not to. Where else will a girl like that find a catch like Ethan? The drive back to my apartment was a blur of tears and fury. I had to pull over once, my body shaking with a toxic cocktail of humiliation and betrayal. My phone buzzed insistently, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. I ignored it. I couldn't speak to him yet, not until the sound of his mother's condescending laugh had faded from my ears. Back in the sterile quiet of my condo, I finally called him back. He answered on the first ring, his voice laced with concern. Sophia? Thank God. Mom said you left upset. What happened? What happened? My voice was dangerously quiet. What happened is that your parents ambushed me with a prenup and threatened to cancel our wedding if I didn't sign it on the spot. And they seemed to be under the impression you knew all about it. The silence on the other end of the line was his confession. Ethan? I prompted, my heart sinking with every passing second. Sophie. I didn't know they were going to do it like that, he stammered. I told them I would talk to you myself. So you knew, I stated. It wasn't a question. You knew about this document, and you said nothing to me. I was going to, he insisted, his voice rising in defense. I kept putting it off. I knew you'd be upset, and things were already so stressful. So you left me to be blindsided by them? You let them treat me like some problem to be managed. The accusation hung between us, heavy and undeniable. You're overreacting, he said, and the placating tone in his voice made my blood run cold. It's just a legal document. It's standard for my family. Have you even read this standard document, Ethan? I challenged. Have you read Section 4, the part that could give your family a claim on my company's intellectual property? Another damning pause. Dad said it was just the usual template. The usual template that ensures I walk away with nothing? I shot back. The one that treats my life's work as an asset your family can potentially control? Is that the man I'm supposed to marry? A man who doesn't even bother to read a contract that will define his wife's entire future? They shouldn't have given you an ultimatum, he said, finally sounding contrite. Of course the wedding isn't off. Then call them, I demanded. Call them right now and tell them that. Tell them their ultimatum is unacceptable, and we will not be discussing this further until after we are married. Sophia, be reasonable, he started. And that was it. That was the moment the heartbreak solidified into something else. Something harder. Reasonable? I whispered. You need to decide, Ethan. Are you a Blackwood, or are you my partner? Because from where I'm standing, It looks like you can't be both. I ended the call before he could answer, my hand trembling. I sank onto my couch, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. For a long moment, I let the despair wash over me. Then, my eyes fell on the insulting document still sitting on my coffee table, and a new feeling began to burn through the hurt. It was a cold, clear, clarifying anger. They thought this was a game of power and money. They had no idea I was already a player. For a single, paralyzing moment, I was adrift in the wreckage of my own fairy tale. Then, my eyes fell on the navy blue document on my coffee table, a symbol of their profound miscalculation. The tears stopped. The shaking ceased. The despair was burned away by a cold, surgical rage. They thought this was a game of money? Fine. It was a game I had been quietly winning for years. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. My first message was to Harold Winters. Harold had been my grandfather's attorney, a silver-haired lion in his 70s who had seen and won decades of Chicago's ugliest legal battles. He was shrewd, impeccably ethical, and fiercely protective of my interests. Need urgent 7 a.m. meeting. My office. Prenup ambush. Wedding in 3 days. His reply came in under a minute. I'll bring the coffee. And the fire. At 7 a.m. sharp, Harold walked into my downtown office, briefcase in hand. I had dressed for war in a charcoal gray power suit and the pearl earrings my grandfather had given me, a reminder of where my real legacy came from. I handed him the Blackwood prenup without a word. He read it in silence, his expression hardening with each page. After a full 10 minutes, he set it down, removed his glasses, and looked at me over steepled fingers. In 45 years of practice, he said, his voice a low growl, this is one of the most predatory, offensively one-sided documents I have ever had the misfortune to read. It's not a prenuptial agreement. It's a bill of indentured servitude. They told me to sign it or the wedding was off. I said, my voice flat. Did they now? A slow, dangerous smile spread across Harold's face. Excellent. It seems the Blackwoods have mistaken a sleeping tigress for a house cat. Their ignorance of your financial position is a tactical error of catastrophic proportions. He opened his briefcase. So, shall we merely reject their insulting offer? Or shall we scorch the earth beneath their feet with a counter-proposal so perfectly balanced, so ironclad in its fairness, that to refuse it would expose them as the greedy dinosaurs they truly are? For the next 2 hours, we worked. We didn't just draft a legal document. We crafted a declaration of independence. It protected my existing $9 million and all future growth of my company. It also protected Ethan's family trust and future inheritance. It laid out fair terms for shared property, alimony, and, most importantly, contained an impenetrable wall around my intellectual property. It was a document between equals. Now the strategy, Harold said, tapping his pen. You must deal with Ethan first. Your united front is your primary weapon. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Can we please talk? I'm so sorry, Soph. I've made a terrible mistake. I agreed to meet him at Carlucci's, the upscale Italian place where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. It was a place of happy memories, and I wanted to see if any of that foundation was left to salvage. He was already there when I arrived, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. The usual confident swagger of a Blackwood heir was gone, replaced by the haunted look of a man who knew he had failed profoundly. Sophia, he began, his voice hoarse as I sat down. I am so sorry. What I did, what I allowed to happen, was cowardly and unforgivable. They told me you knew. I said, my voice devoid of warmth. I did. He admitted, his eyes full of self-loathing. They brought it up weeks ago. I told them I'd handle it, that I'd talk to you. But I was a coward. I knew it was wrong. I knew how it would make you feel. And I kept putting it off, hoping it would just go away. I let you walk into that ambush, and I will never forgive myself for it. He took a shaky breath. After our call, I went to their house. I told them they had no right. I told them if the wedding was canceled, it would be by me, not them, and that I would personally call every single guest and tell them exactly why. A flicker of the man I loved shone through the mess. And how did that go? My father called me a naive fool. My mother cried. her tears a weapon she's wielded my entire life, and accused me of choosing a stranger over my own blood. It was ugly. For a moment, standing there, the weight of their disappointment was suffocating. But then I saw your face in my mind, the trust in your eyes that I had betrayed. The choice became blindingly clear. I walked out without looking back. I spent the night on a friend's couch, replaying my cowardice over and over. He finally looked me in the eye. I choose you, Sophia, if you'll still have me. I choose our life, not their legacy. This was the moment, the point of no return. There's something you don't know about me, Ethan, I said quietly. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single-page summary of my financial portfolio. I slid it across the table. Your parents made assumptions about me based on my parents' profession and the car I drive. They were wrong. He picked up the paper, his brow furrowed in confusion. I watched as his eyes scanned the lines. I saw the exact moment his brain processed the numbers. His jaw went slack. His eyes widened in disbelief. $7.5 million in investments? He whispered, his voice cracking. An EduTech valued at $1.5 million? Sophia, you're worth $9 million? He looked up at me, a storm of emotions crossing his face, shock, confusion, and a flicker of something I had dreaded, hurt. Why didn't you tell me? For the same reason you hate being introduced as Ethan Blackwood of the Chicago Blackwoods. I replied gently. I wanted to be Sophia. Just Sophia. I wanted a man to fall in love with me, not my bank account. I needed to know it was real. He stared at the paper, then back at me, and the hurt in his eyes was replaced by a slow, dawning wave of awe and understanding. My God, he breathed. All this time, my mother has been dropping hints about your modest background. My father treating your company like a hobby. He let out a short, bitter laugh. They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they? No, they don't, I confirmed. But they're about to find out. I slid the second document across the table, our new prenup. This is the agreement for a marriage of equals. I will not sign theirs. We will sign this one together. Or we will sign nothing at all. This is our future, Ethan. And tonight, we present it to your parents as a non-negotiable term of our merger. He read through the document, his lawyer's mind immediately grasping its equity and brilliant construction. A slow, determined smile spread across his face. It was the smile of the man I had fallen in love with. Okay, he said, closing the folder and taking my hand. His grip was firm, resolute. Let's go slay some dragons. That evening, at 6 p.m., we walked into a private dining room I had booked at the Lakeview restaurant. It was neutral territory, a boardroom disguised with fine china and a stunning view of the lake. We were a united front. Ethan, in a sharp navy suit, looked every bit the powerful attorney. But he was mine, not his father's. I wore a cream-colored dress that was understated but screamed quiet confidence. Richard and Victoria arrived 17 minutes late, a classic power move. They swept in, expecting to find a chastened, compliant little schoolteacher's daughter, ready to sign away her life for a piece of the Blackwood name. Ethan, darling, Victoria began, ignoring me as she air-kissed her son. I'm so glad Sophia has come to her senses. We can sign this unpleasantness away and get back to the celebration. We will not be signing your document, Ethan stated, his voice ringing with newfound authority. We found its terms to be unacceptable. Richard's eyes narrowed. Unacceptable? It's the standard family agreement. Perhaps, I said, speaking for the first time. But the circumstances are far from standard, which is why we've prepared a more appropriate agreement. I slid our prenup across the table. Victoria let out that tinkling, condescending laugh. An agreement you prepared? Sophia, dear, what assets could you possibly need to protect? Your collection of teaching awards? I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. I let the silence hang for a beat, enjoying the last seconds of her smug superiority. Then, I dropped the bomb. My current net worth is approximately $9 million. I stated, my voice calm and even. I slid my financial portfolio across the table to land squarely on top of the new prenup. $7.5 million in a diversified portfolio inherited from my grandfather, and a $1.5 million valuation for my company, EduTech Solutions. I believe that qualifies as an asset base worth protecting. Don't you? Silence. The absolute, deafening, soul-shattering silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Victoria's perfectly made-up face went completely pale. Her manicured hand, which had been resting elegantly on the table, twitched and retreated to her lap as if burned. Her mouth opened slightly, a silent O of disbelief. For the first time, I saw a crack in her flawless porcelain mask, revealing the utter shock beneath. The color drained from her cheeks as if someone had pulled a plug. Richard, ever the pragmatist, finally broke the spell. He snatched the portfolio, his movements jerky and uncharacteristically clumsy. His knuckles were white as he gripped the papers, his liar's composure shattered by the sheer, unexpected magnitude of his error. This is impossible," Victoria stammered, looking from the papers to me as if seeing me for the first time. My grandfather believed in the power of compound interest more than the power of social status, I replied coolly. Richard cleared his throat, his mind visibly recalibrating, shifting from family patriarch to crisis mode attorney. "This changes things." "Yes, it does," Ethan affirmed, his hand finding mine under the table. "It changes everything. The document in front of you is our only offer. It protects Sophia's assets and my own. It is fair, it is balanced, and it is non-negotiable. You will have your lawyers review it. You will sign it by tomorrow afternoon, or Sophia and I will be getting married in a private ceremony. And you will find out about it when we send you a postcard from our honeymoon." The power in the room had not just shifted. It had undergone a tectonic reversal. We were no longer seeking their approval. We were dictating terms. Victoria looked at me, her eyes filled with a confusion so profound it was almost pitiable. All her metrics for judging people, family name, social connections, outward displays of wealth had failed her. She had looked at me and seen a pawn, when all along I had been a queen. "We will have our attorneys review it," Richard finally conceded, closing the folder with a snap. It was the sound of his surrender. He stood and, to my utter astonishment, extended his hand across the table to me. "You are a formidable young woman, Sophia, a very formidable negotiator." I shook his hand, my grip firm. "I look forward to becoming part of the family," I said, and we all knew what I really meant. The family is about to change. The 2 days that followed were a masterclass in controlled chaos. The Blackwood family lawyers, a team renowned for their aggressive tactics, reviewed our document. They sent back a red-line version with a dozen proposed changes, each one a subtle attempt to claw back some of the power their clients had lost. Harold, with my and Ethan's approval, rejected every single one with a curt, 2-word email, as drafted. Richard called Ethan, sputtering about unreasonable terms. Ethan's response was simple. "The terms are fair, Dad. Sign it, or we'll see you at Christmas." Maybe. The signed document arrived via courier the next afternoon, 24 hours before the ceremony. The war was over. We had won. On my wedding day, I wasn't a bundle of nerves. I was serenely calm. As I stood in the bridal suite of the Drake Hotel, looking at my reflection in the mirror, I saw more than just a bride in a beautiful dress. I saw a woman who had faced down a dynasty and refused to be diminished. I had not married my way into power. I had revealed the power I'd held all along. There was a soft knock on the door. My mother opened it to find Victoria Blackwood standing there, holding a small, velvet-wrapped box. She looked different. The icy armor of her matriarchal authority was gone, replaced by a weary, almost hesitant, expression. She asked for a moment alone. When the door closed, Victoria didn't speak immediately. She simply looked at me, her gaze taking in the dress, my face, my composure. "My husband told me you were a formidable negotiator," she began, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "He was wrong. You're a force of nature." I waited, saying nothing. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice barely above a whisper and laced with a slight tremor. The words sounded foreign and difficult on her tongue. "A real one. I misjudged you completely. I saw your background, not your character. I saw your modesty." Her gaze flickered to the sapphire earrings. "And I mistook it for weakness. I was arrogant, and I was wrong. The Blackwood family. I would be lucky to have you." She held out the velvet box. "This is a peace offering, and a welcome." I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, was a pair of exquisite sapphire and diamond earrings. They were clearly antique, radiating a sense of history. They belonged to Ethan's great-grandmother, Victoria explained. She was the daughter of a steelworker. The family was scandalized when her husband, my husband's grandfather, proposed to her. They said she was beneath them. During the Great Depression, when the family firm was on the brink of collapse, she used her common sense and sharp mind to save it. She became the most respected matriarch this family has ever known, I think. She would have liked you very much. It was an admission, a concession, and a sign of respect all in one. It was Victoria acknowledging that strength came in many forms, not just from a family name. Tears pricked my eyes as I removed my grandfather's pearls and allowed my future mother-in-law to help me fasten the sapphire earrings. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. With that single gesture, a bridge was built over the chasm of their prejudice. As I walked down the aisle moments later, my eyes were only for Ethan. The love and pride radiating from his face was the only validation I had ever truly needed. We said our vows, not as a boy from a powerful family and a girl who got lucky, but as two sovereign nations choosing to form a new, more powerful union. At the reception, the change in atmosphere was palpable. Richard introduced me to his powerful colleagues not as his son's bride, but as the brilliant founder of EduTech Solutions. Friends of the family who had previously offered me polite, dismissive smiles now engaged me in conversations about technology and investment strategy. The power had not just shifted, it had been equalized. Later that evening, as Ethan and I danced our first dance, he leaned in and whispered, "You know, my great-grandmother's portrait hangs in the West Wing. She has the same look in her eyes that you had in that restaurant." "And what look is that?" I murmured, resting my head on his shoulder. "The look of a woman who knows exactly who she is and will never, ever apologize for it." Our marriage wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a true partnership. We built our own life, on our own terms, in a home we bought together with our combined resources. We established boundaries with the Blackwoods, love and respect, but not obligation. The dreaded Sunday dinners became a once-a-month affair that we genuinely enjoyed. Now that the power dynamics had been permanently rewritten, the prenuptial agreement that caused so much pain now sits locked away, its true purpose fulfilled. It wasn't about planning for a divorce. It was about defining the very foundation of our marriage, a partnership of equals. The Blackwoods wanted to make our marriage about money, status, and control, and in a way, I let them. I just used my own. Have you ever had to stand your ground against people who underestimated you? Tell me about a time you revealed your true worth and wiped those smug grins clean. Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of turning the tables resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more stories of quiet strength and triumphant comebacks. And remember, never let anyone else write your price tag. You are worth more than they could ever imagine.